This is TWiT.
I'm very excited about this next interview. We are joined once again by Kate Knibbs of Wired. Welcome back to the show, Kate.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, so you are a prolific writer. You've now covered 2 major AI copyright rulings in the same week. I'd love to know what stood out to you most about how differently the courts handled the Meta and Anthropic cases, and maybe a quick little kind of overview of what's going on with these cases.
Sure thing. Yeah, it was a very busy week. Please pray with me that no other huge copyright news breaks.
Yes, let's take a moment. Okay,
you.
good.
Thank you. So there are dozens of AI copyright lawsuits currently winding through the courts. These were the first 2 summary judgments from judges dealing with generative AI. So they're hugely precedent setting. They're both very important. And they're fascinating because on the surface, both of the judges sided with the AI companies over whether some of their use of copyrighted materials was fair use in these cases. So surface level looks like a win for Anthropic, looks like a win for Meta. What's fascinating is that there are also losses for the tech companies in very different ways. And I will explain. So Judge William Alsup made the summary judgment in the Anthropic case, and he basically came out and said, in general, it's fair use to use copyrighted materials to train AI tools. However, because during the discovery process, it came out that Anthropic had pirated over 7 million books to create a library that it was planning to use to train AI tools, the judge said, well, piracy is not okay, and you still have to go to trial over that. And so the plaintiffs are going to be able to take Anthropic to trial on the damages. Could be over $1 trillion, which would be really bad for Anthropic. Yeah.
Wow.
And it opens the door for other plaintiffs to do the same to other AI companies, because Anthropic isn't the only AI company that it's known that they used pirated materials.
Yeah, the precedent of it all.
Yeah. So one of the AI companies that we know also used pirated materials is Meta. And in the Meta case that was decided yesterday, the plaintiff's lawyers spent a lot of time arguing about the piracy angle, saying, we can't ignore this. They pirated these books. That is theft. It doesn't matter what they did with them, really. Like, we got to address this. But the Judge Vince Chabria, he didn't really care about this argument. Like, it was not of interest to him. He was laser focused on whether the plaintiffs could prove that Meta harmed their financial prospects by training on their books. He really, really wanted the plaintiffs to prove what is called market harm. And so his ruling was, I'm siding with Meta, but not because I think that every single instance of training on copyrighted books is fair use. It's because I think the plaintiffs did a bad job arguing their case, pretty much. So that also leaves a very large door open for other plaintiffs to bring Meta to file lawsuits against Meta for copyright infringement and just argue it differently. So yeah, it's really wild to see how this has all unfolded.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. In the Anthropic case, the court called LLM training, and I thought this is kind of, again, all of this is so interesting. I'm sure you probably shout this at people walking down the street, like, pay attention. No, I'm kidding. But I would want to do that. Like, you don't understand. All of this is so precedent setting. And I can't imagine being a judge who has to make any of these rulings, because you're really like, wow. Anyway, so the court called LLM training, quote, one of the most transformative uses we'll ever see. How important is that fair use framing, and what precedent? I know I'm going to keep saying that word. Somebody's going to have to start to make a little drinking game, but what precedent might it set?
I think when all of the defense attorneys for the AI companies read that line, they probably took a shot of celebratory champagne or something, because that's definitely going to be huge going forward for them as something to point to say, well, look, this is what the judge said in this first summary judgment. Because whether something is transformative or not is hugely important to making the determination about fair use. And just for anyone who doesn't know what fair use is, because it's a fairly like wonky thing in copyright law, it's a doctrine that allows people to use copyrighted materials without permission in certain circumstances. So that's why, like, I can quote from a book in a news article without first getting permission from the author to do so. My use would be transformative and thus fair. It's why people are allowed to like create parody sketches of popular TV shows without getting sued by the creators. So whether something is transformative, whether it takes the materials and does something new with it, is one of the big things that judges look at when they're deciding if the use of copyrighted materials was legal or not.
The judge in the Meta case emphasized that market harm was a deciding factor, and you talked about this a little bit. Seemed almost frustrated the plaintiffs didn't build that part of the case. I guess, hearing this from the outside, right? It almost sounds like a judge who perhaps wanted to rule a different way and then said, you messed up so bad that I just like you didn't do what you were supposed to do. Otherwise, it could have been this. When you talked about that, it almost sounded like what you were saying, and I would love to be corrected if I'm wrong here. It's almost a hint, maybe, that if you want to argue this in the future, it could be the ruling that you're trying to get if you do a better job on this specific type of argument. Is that the vibe? Like, what yes. exactly was going on there?
That is exactly the vibe. Like, I wouldn't say the judge was almost frustrated. He was pissed. Like, he, even in hearings that they were having leading up to this summary judgment, he was saying to the plaintiff's lawyers, like, if you are able to lay out why this is harming your clients financially, I'm going to rule in your favor. Like, it was sort of the plaintiff's case to lose in the judge's mind. And the summary judgment was sort of an indictment of the way that the case was argued.
Wow.
Yeah. So he seemed quite pained to be issuing the judgment that he issued.
Understood. Both rulings, of course, involved allegations of piracy, but only one judge allowed that part to go to trial. What is it there that made the courts kind of treat these issues so differently?
It's so wild watching all of these cases because it really cements the truth that it really depends what judge you get. I'm so curious how it would have played out if Judge Alsup had been the one sitting for the Meta case, because he really cared about piracy. So yeah, it truly can sometimes just come down to the judge's interpretation of the law. Also, the Anthropic case was a class action, and the Meta case was just limited to 13 plaintiffs. So I think, and again, I'm not actually a copyright lawyer, even though I'm obsessed with this. So I think that might have played into why one was going to trial and one wasn't. But yeah, I listened to so many hours of legal proceedings in both of these cases leading up to these judgments. And the whole way through, Judge Chabria didn't seem to want to hear about the piracy. And now we know why. It's because he wasn't planning on making it an important part of his ruling.
Understood. In reporting both stories, I'm curious if you got a sense of how these rulings are being received in the AI industry overall versus the creative and publishing sectors who are kind of at odds here. Yeah,
I get a lot of feedback, as you can imagine. It's so interesting because everyone is sort of declaring victory here. The AI companies obviously did technically win in the summary judgment sided with them. Advocates who support the idea that AI training is fair use are also just calling this a win, and they tend to be emphasizing the way both judges did say that AI training was transformative. But a lot of people close to the plaintiffs that I've spoken with and other plaintiffs that I've spoken with in lawsuits that are still ongoing and just advocates for rights holders, they're kind of chalking these up as wins too because of the huge caveats that the rulings came with. Like, now they have opportunities to go for damages worth billions and maybe trillions of dollars anytime that piracy was involved in the amassing of the data sets that are used to train. And then Yeah, the judge in the Meta case truly did leave a huge lane for anyone who wanted to bring a different lawsuit against the tech companies. So everyone's a winner somehow.
To round things out here, looking ahead, are there any cases or rulings that you are particularly watching that might further clarify the limits of fair use in AI training? Or maybe it's just what happens next in these cases.
Yeah, I'd say there are three that I have a close eye on. One is the New York Times versus OpenAI. And that had sort of long been considered one of the best laid out complaints against a tech company. They had provided a lot of instances that they were able to show OpenAI regurgitating word for word New York Times content. Similarly, there was a new case. Disney and Universal sued Midjourney, the image generation startup. Similarly to the New York Times case, they brought tons of receipts that they were just like all of these different images of very recognizable Disney and Universal characters like the Boss Baby and Darth Vader that had been generated by Midjourney. I think both of those cases will still be hugely important. And then there's also been a lot of rumors that the music labels are considering settling with the music generation startups Suno and Udio. And we haven't seen a settlement at all. So that would be huge too. So those are the three that I'm like keeping the closest eye on. But the Anthropic case kind of was a sleeper for me, and now it's hugely important. So there's probably at least one or two others going on that I should be paying attention to. If anyone listening wants to tell me what else I should be looking into.
Thanks so much for watching this little chunk of Tech News Weekly. If you'd like to get the full episode, well, head over to twit.tv/TNW. There you'll find buttons you can click or tap to subscribe to the entire show in audio and video formats. Or just look in the description. We've got links down there as well.